November 30th, 1939. 500,000 Soviet soldiers crossed the Finnish border in temperatures nearing -40 degrees Celsius. Stalin expects his men in Helsinki within 2 weeks. His commanders promise a parade through conquered streets before Christmas. 3 months later, the snow will be stacked with 25,000 Soviet corpses for every 10,000 Finnish defenders killed. The Red Army, fresh from purging its best officers, convinced of its own invincibility, is about to learn that numbers mean nothing when the forest itself becomes your enemy. Stalin wants buffer space. The border sits barely 30 kilometers from Leningrad, Russia's second city. He demands Finland surrender territory, cede islands, lease military bases. A reasonable request, he thinks, from a superpower to a nation of 3 million farmers and foresters. Finland refuses. Not from bravado, from bitter memory. They'd tasted Russian occupation before. They knew what temporary concessions meant in Stalin's vocabulary. So the Soviet leader decides to take what diplomacy couldn't deliver. His intelligence reports promise minimal resistance. The Finnish army is tiny, poorly equipped, almost medieval by modern standards. His generals assure him the operation will cost less than subduing Poland. They're catastrophically wrong. They've confused weakness with vulnerability. Finland is neither. The Soviet commanders approach this war like men scheduling a business trip. Marshal Clement Voroshilov, Stalin's old revolutionary comrade, oversees the operation. He's a political survivor, not a tactician. His officers are terrified yes-men who learned during the purges that disagreeing with Moscow's timeline means a bullet in a basement. They plan for victory parades, not winter warfare. Across the border, Finnish Marshal Carl Gustaf Emil Mannerheim sees the storm coming. At 72, he's fought in 2 wars and commanded armies before Stalin rose to power. He knows his 400,000-strong mobilization faces an enemy 4 times larger. He knows his men lack artillery, tanks, anti-aircraft guns, but he also knows something the Soviets don't. He knows Finnish forests in winter aren't terrain, they're a weapon. The first Soviet columns advance confidently. Their tanks rumble forward on the few roads cutting through Finland's endless forests. Their supply chains stretch behind them, vulnerable and exposed. They're urban soldiers, recruited from Moscow and Kiev, wearing uniforms designed for spring maneuvers. The Finns vanish into white wilderness. Then the killing starts, not in grand battles, in silent, surgical strikes. Finnish ski troops, wearing improvised white camouflage, carrying submachine guns and Molotov cocktails, appear from nowhere. They hit Soviet columns at dusk, slaughter the guards, disappear before reinforcements arrive. They understand something profound. In forests this dense, in cold this brutal, you don't need to win battles. You need to make survival impossible. The temperature drops. Soviet soldiers begin freezing at their posts. Frostbite claims thousands before combat does. Supply trucks can't navigate forest roads. When columns stop to rest, they become perfect targets.
December 1939. The Battle of Suomussalmi. 2 full Soviet divisions, nearly 30,000 men, push deep into Finnish territory along a single road. Mannerheim orders the route cut. Finnish troops, outnumbered 6-1, strike from the trees. They don't attack the Soviet formation head-on. They slice it into segments, surround each piece, let winter finish the work. Soviet soldiers, trapped in sub-zero darkness, burn their vehicles for warmth. The flames make perfect targets. Finnish snipers, men like Simo Haiha, a farmer who'll kill over 500 Soviets without a telescopic sight, pick off officers first, then machine gunners, then anyone who tries to organize resistance. The Soviets have tanks. They're useless. The tanks can't leave the road, can't maneuver, can't see targets that attack and melt into white forest. They become frozen coffins. By late December, the Soviet divisions cease to exist. 23,000 casualties, mangled bodies scattered across 40 kilometers of frozen wilderness. Survivors stumble back across the border with stories that sound like horror fiction. But Moscow doesn't adjust. Moscow sends more men. February, 1940. The Soviets finally learn. They mass overwhelming artillery on the Karelian Isthmus, the one place where forests can't swallow armies. They shell Finnish positions until concrete bunkers collapse into dust. They accept obscene casualties, 5 Soviet soldiers dead for every Finn, and grind forward through sheer mathematical superiority. Finland's ammunition runs out. Their men are exhausted. International aid never arrives. March 13, 1940. Finland signs the Moscow Peace Treaty. They lose 10% of their territory. 30,000 Finnish soldiers are dead. But the Soviet losses tell the real story. 126,000 dead, nearly 300,000 wounded or frostbitten. The Red Army attacked expecting a training exercise. They got the bloodiest winter in modern military history. Stalin gets his buffer zone, but the world sees what it cost. The Soviet military looks incompetent, purge-weakened, incapable of basic winter operations, a dangerous signal to send when Nazi Germany is watching. Hitler studies the Winter War closely. He sees Soviet tactical failures, sees Finnish determination, sees that numbers don't guarantee victory in brutal conditions. These observations will poison his calculations when he invades Russia in 1941. He'll assume Soviet weakness is permanent. Fatal mistake. The Soviets learn differently. They reorganize winter warfare doctrine, redesign uniforms, retrain for forest combat. When Germany invades 18 months later, the Red Army remembers Finnish lessons. They understand cold as a weapon. They know how to use terrain against invaders. The humiliation in Finland becomes education in Moscow. Modern military academies still teach Suomi, not as an inspirational story, as a case study in how terrain, weather, and tactical innovation can destroy numerical advantage, how arrogance and political fear can turn armies into victims. War punishes assumptions. The Soviets assumed size meant victory. They assumed their timeline was reality. They assumed the enemy would cooperate with their plans. Each assumption cost thousands of lives. Logistics defeat armies more reliably than bullets. Soviet supply failures killed as many men as Finnish guns. You can't fight wars your infrastructure can't support. You can't occupy territory you can't feed, warm, or resupply. Fear destroys command structures. Soviet officers, terrified of Stalin's purges, reported success when they meant disaster. They followed idiotic orders rather than risk appearing defeatist. Political terror made military competence impossible. Never underestimate defenders on their own ground. The Finns didn't win battles through courage alone. They won because they understood their terrain intimately and used it with surgical precision. Knowledge compounds bravery into effectiveness. The Winter War lasted 105 days. It shattered reputations, rewrote doctrines, and proved that national survival depends less on arsenal size than on will, adaptation, and understanding how to make geography your ally. Stalin got his land, but Finland kept its independence. Sometimes losing territory is winning the war. If you want to understand how conflicts are really decided, not through propaganda or glory, but through logistics, psychology, and the brutal intersection of human ambition with physical reality, subscribe. We dig into the wars that shaped modern strategy, the battles textbooks simplify, and the lessons commanders still study when stakes are highest.